They thought a rusted key would break me. In the room where legacies were decided and futures quietly erased, my father lounged into his inheritance. My brother adjusted his cufflinks as if they were coronation jewels, and my name was treated like a footnote. By the time the lawyer pressed a single corroded key into my palm and the laughter rose like a verdict, shame scorched my throat and something else lit behind it, a small hard flame that refused to die. That night, the key wouldn't let me sleep. The day the will was read smelled of polished wood and old leather, the aroma of respectability that usually means someone else will be respected more than you. Mr. Harper, our family lawyer, cleared his throat and spoke with the solemn rhythm of a judge. To my son, Richard Carter, I leave the family estate and all properties attached. My father's smile widened like a door unlocking itself. To my grandson, Ethan Carter, I leave the investment portfolio valued at approximately $25 million. Ethan's grin sent a shard through me. He leaned just close enough to whisper that now we knew who Grandpa trusted with the real money. Names spilled onward, my aunts with parcels of land, cousins with vacation homes, even a yacht that drew a tasteful gasp until the tide receded and the room held its breath. To my granddaughter, Sophia Carter, I leave a garage in the industrial district along with the key to it. Laughter arrived in waves. A garage? My father's chuckle hardened into a sneer. Even your grandfather knew you'd never amount to anything. Ethan's voice echoed, bright with mockery. Maybe it's full of broken tools. Perfect for you, sis. My mother's hand slipped over mine and squeezed. Don't let them, she whispered. Your grandfather never did anything without a reason. I closed my fingers around the key until rust dusted my skin. The next morning at 6 a.m., my alarm buzzed in my cramped apartment. The ceiling above me, a web of cracks that had outlived 3 tenants and a dozen unkept promises, while Ethan slid into a gleaming sports car and sailed toward a corner office where people greeted him with the choreography of admiration. I took the bus to a gray building where I filed paperwork at a small desk behind gray partitions for bosses who sometimes forgot my name. At lunch, I cradled a chipped mug and listened to handbags, rooftop bars, weekend flights. By evening, the city lights smeared into tired gold, and I caught my reflection hair knotted into a defiant bun, posture sagging under small demands. I went home, shut the door on the laugh track in the living room, and set the key on my palm. Life's an adventure. Sophia, Grandpa used to say on the farmhouse porch while cicadas stitched the dark. Don't fear failure. Fear never taking the first step. Sentences I'd once filed under charming nostalgia. Now the cold metal felt like a dare. At 9 p.m., I rode a nearly empty bus west, past the neighborhoods where the city forgets itself. The industrial district breathed in weak streetlight and coughed out wind through rusted ribs. The building was squat and pitted, a stubborn rectangle of stained concrete. Above the iron door, a bleached sign held one word, Carter. My breath snagged. The key turned with a reluctant clunk, as if it had been waiting specifically for my hand, and the hinges cried out a long complaint that rolled down the empty street. Inside. My flashlight sliced the dark into a narrow blade-cracked floor. Cobwebs like tired curtains. Rotting crates slouched against the walls. The smell of oil and dust thickened. I muttered, my grand inheritance, and kept walking because standing still felt like surrender. The light skimmed a far wall and snagged on a shape that didn't belong, a smaller steel door, half concealed behind crates, a brass plaque screwed into it. I shoved the crates aside and coughed as dust bloomed. The engraving was faint but unmistakable, my birthday. A tremor moved through me. Above the bolt, a combination dial sulked, stiff with rust. Month, day, year. Each click sounded like a footstep in a museum. For a beat, nothing happened, then a precise release. The quiet relief of a knot coming loose. Cold air exhaled up a narrow stairwell, carrying earth and metal. I pulled the door shut behind me, the clang sealing one life and opening another, and began to descend into the kind of darkness that expects you to turn back. At the bottom, my light steadied and struck iron shelves. Something on them answered, a dull yellow gleam that spread like sunrise. I stopped breathing. Row upon row of solid bars glimmered gold, not rumor or legend, but weight, sleeping in tidy stacks. The meticulousness of a man who believed order could keep chaos at bay. My knees went soft. I reached out. The bar dragged at my hand with its seriousness. In the center of the room, an iron table held an envelope sealed with red wax. For Sophia, the script shaken by age but unmistakably his. I broke the seal with clumsy care and unfolded the thick paper. Dear Sophia, if you are reading this, you have found the vault. What you see is not a gift to keep for yourself. It is a challenge. This gold belongs to those who need it more than you. Your task is to deliver it to the 5 addresses listed on the racks. Everything you need is prepared. I am sorry for placing this burden on you, but I believe you are the only one who can fulfill it. Be strong, Sophia." The room tilted. Not a reward, a charge. Temptation arrived with perfect timing. Persuasive and warm. 1 bar, whispered a corner of me I didn't recognize. 1 bar to breathe, to eat like a person, to look into a room that is made a sport of lowering your chin and meet it level. A red sports car knifed through my mind. My father's smirk faltered. Then Grandpa's eyes returned, steady as a lighthouse. "Wealth isn't what you keep for yourself, Sophia, but what you're willing to give away." My hand shook so hard the envelope rattled. I set the bar back in its place and listened to the finality of metal on metal. "If this is what you wanted," I whispered to a man who wasn't there, "I'll try. God help me, I'll try." By 8 a.m. the next morning, I borrowed a friend's dented pickup and learned, with a grunt that wrenched my back, what 1 crate of gold actually demanded from the human body. The straps bit my palms as I cinched them twice, then a 3rd time for fear more than safety. Every scenario flickered sirens in the mirror, a routine traffic stop turning into a riddle with no legal answer. My name threaded into headlines I'd never survive. I kept Grandpa's letter folded in my chest pocket, its edges softening with the heat of my breath. The first address pointed north, and by noon the city's concrete had given way to long corridors of pine, the sky the color of cooled steel. I drove as if every mile might ask me to turn back, and every gas station felt like confession. When strangers lingered near the truck bed, I moved closer, casual and rigid at once, the way prey pretends it is not prey. At dusk on the 3rd day, tires crunched over a small driveway carved into the Adirondacks. The cabin was tidy and stubborn, wood stacked in even cords, repairs done by someone who believed in things holding. An old man with rainwater eyes opened the door before I could knock, his cane steady, his jaw set in a way that did not invite pity. "Henry," I asked, my breath fogging. He nodded like we were resuming a conversation paused in another decade. Inside, the air smelled of pine and something on the stove that remembered better years. I pried open the crate and tilted the lid. Gold caught the last of the afternoon and scattered it softly around the room. He did not reach for a bar. He reached for a memory braided into the metal. "During the war," he said, "your grandfather made a choice that saved all of us. He took a bullet and called it nothing. We promised to spend what was left doing quiet things that mattered." His hand fell, weathered and sure, onto the ingots as though they might bruise. "You have his eyes." The words undid me. I nodded because if I spoke, I would cry, and I left with the cold clearing my face and something heavier than the crate settling into my ribs, the suspicion that the gold was less valuable than the direction it was pointing me. Back on the road, relief and absence wrestled like exhausted fighters. 1 crate lighter, no richer than before. I slept in the truck with the windows cracked and the pines speaking in their sleep, and at 6 a.m. I was moving again, south and then east, following the 2nd address into the glass and water of Boston. I ditched the truck 2 towns out, took a train where the gold traveled as cargo under a name that wasn't mine, and sat with my palms pressed on my knees for 10 hours while every squeal of the rails sounded like a verdict. The office above the harbor was all light and reflection. Charles Donovan's suit looked expensive. His voice did not. When the crate opened, the room brightened in a way electricity cannot explain. "That is William," he murmured, and the name was a photograph for him, something he could set his coffee on and never spill. He spoke of a mechanic with dirt under his nails who built an empire not by cutting throats, but by keeping promises, of contracts honored when profit advised against it, of people who kept showing up because he did. Then he slid a small folded note across the desk, and I recognized the ridged, patient script before I opened it. "Keep your integrity. Sophia." Gold is secondary. 5 words, and the floor steadied beneath me. I tucked the note over my heart and felt ridiculous and also fortified, like a soldier who knows the banner is just cloth and salutes anyway. Night fell like a curtain on the ride back, and the window turned to a dark mirror showing me 2 lives in 1. I disappeared with the next crate and learned how to be admired by people whose admiration was another hunger in the other. I kept moving through addresses that untied old knots and tied new ones around my sense of self. The train hissed into the station near midnight. I slept a few hours in a motel that smelled like old summers and cigarettes. Then by 7 a.m. I was pushing west. The 3rd address, a pin near Tucson. The desert did not simply burn, it interrogated. Heat climbed into the cab and sat on my chest. The nursing home was squat and ringed with wildflowers that refused surrender. Inside, a nurse named Susan pressed a fist to her mouth when she saw the bars, then reached for my hand as if steadiness could be transferred palm to palm. "He never forgot us," she said, and a common room of soft chairs and scarred chessboards reoriented toward the crate like sunflowers toward light. An old man told me about winters that would have been teeth without blankets, about meals that arrived when shame would have kept them from asking. The gold found its place. Laughter rose where it had been rationed, and for the first time I understood how a weight could lighten a room. I ate dinner there because leaving felt indecent. The stew was simple and tasted like care. Stories of my grandfather spilled from corners, a check slipped under a door with no signature, a phone call made on someone's behalf with no mention of who placed it, a generator that arrived the day after a storm when the mayor was still giving interviews. I slept in the truck under a sky too crowded with stars to be reasonable, woke at 5 a.m. with stiffness flowering in every muscle, and turned the ignition toward Chicago with the fourth address tugging the way a child tugs when they have urgent news. By late morning 2 days later, the Horizon Charity Foundation mirrored the city back at itself from a tower of glass. My shirt clung with sweat as I muscled the last crate through a lobby that smelled of lilies and disinfectant. The receptionist's smile faltered when I placed Grandpa's letter on the counter. Minutes later, I stood in an office looking at photographs I couldn't handle, children under blankets threaded with tubes, students in secondhand gowns lifting diplomas, families in the aftermath of water and wind holding boxes labeled by no one. Mr. Porter, no relation. But the echo of my surname still startled me, touched the bars with trembling fingers. "Your grandfather was one of our quiet founders," he said. "Hospitals, scholarships, disaster relief, always anonymous, always for people." When I stepped back into the drizzle, the gold was gone, and my hands would not stop shaking. I drove until the streets turned familiar and then unfamiliar again, until the truck found the old iron door by habit, until I was standing in the empty vault listening to the echo of my own breath. I did it. "Grandpa," I whispered, and the shelves answered with nothing. For the first time, I admitted what had been growing like mold in a corner. I did not feel noble. I felt stripped. The storm cracked light into the basement, and I pressed my forehead to concrete and cried the kind of cry that has its own weather. I wasn't strong enough. I said to the dark, "I just obeyed," and I still have nothing. The iron door creaked above me, and for an instant I thought despair had started inventing noises. But then came footsteps, deliberate, on the stairs. My flashlight beam trembled over the landing until it caught the figure of a tall man in a dark suit. His hair was streaked with silver, his eyes precise but not unkind. "Sophia Carter," he said, his voice firm enough to anchor the room. My back hit the wall. "Who are you? How did you get in here?" My words broke between fear and anger. He inclined his head. "Arthur Hayes, your grandfather's private lawyer. Harper was for the public. I was for what William kept hidden." He set a leather briefcase on the iron table, snapped it open, and slid a thick envelope sealed with red wax toward me. "This vault was never about inheritance. It was about you." I peeled the seal with shaking fingers. "Dear Sophia, if you are reading this, then you did what I hoped. You chose integrity over greed, compassion over pride. The gold was never meant to be yours. It was a test, to prove you could carry not just wealth, but responsibility. You did not fail me. You are ready." My chest tightened as Arthur placed a neat stack of documents on the table. Bank accounts, real estate deeds, stock certificates, all in my name. His voice was steady. "Your grandfather established a trust valued at $10 million. It is yours now." The words staggered me. I sank into the chair, clutching the papers like they might vanish. $10 million, I whispered, tears rising fast. "Why didn't he give me this from the start?" Arthur's gaze softened. "Because William wanted you to understand money is nothing without meaning. He needed you to prove it to yourself first. And you did." The sobs came then, unrelenting, a release of weeks of exhaustion and temptation. Arthur closed the briefcase and spoke quietly. "This isn't just money. It's a legacy. Use it as he would have quietly, selflessly, with courage, when he left." The basement seemed to shift. The shelves were still bare, but the emptiness no longer mocked me. It felt like a cocoon I had finally broken through. I climbed the stairs and pushed open the iron door. The storm had passed. Rain polished the streets to mirrors that caught the moonlight. For the first time, the air didn't feel heavy. It felt alive. In the days that followed, I lived two lives at once. Outwardly, nothing changed. I returned to my small apartment, still surrounded by roommates who laughed at sitcom reruns. I walked past the chipped furniture, still caught the same crowded bus. But inside, something had shifted beyond recognition. The trust papers lived in a locked drawer. Grandpa's letter I kept with me always, folded to softness, his words playing like a song. You chose integrity over greed. You are ready. Temptation still prowled. More than once I stared at the accounts, at numbers that could dissolve every problem, and heard that insidious whisper, spend it all on yourself. But each time I remembered Henry's rainwater eyes, Donovan's sad smile, the residents in Tucson clutching blankets, the photographs of children in hospital beds. They anchored me to something larger than comfort. Slowly, my heartbeat began to align with theirs. The first family gathering after everything tested me harder than any crate of gold. I walked into the mansion my father had inherited, the chandeliers gleaming, the marble floors polished to insult. Ethan stood near the bar in his tailored suit, laughing loudly enough to remind the room of his triumphs. When he saw me, his grin sharpened. "Ah, Sophia, how's the garage?" The room chuckled with him. Practiced and cruel. I smiled calm, unforced, the kind that unsettled because it refused to play. The garage was exactly what I needed. I said, "Steady." Ethan scoffed. "Did you find rats to keep you company?" More laughter, but I let it roll off. The key rested in my pocket, cool against my palm, a reminder of where I'd started and why none of this noise mattered. I didn't need to reveal the trust. I didn't need to explain the journey. Some truths were meant to remain between me and Grandpa alone. Leaving the insurance company was quieter than I expected. No one begged me to stay. I rented a modest office downtown with cracked windows and a leaky radiator. There, I began quietly funding projects that mattered: scholarships for students who couldn't breathe under debt, community kitchens where no one asked questions, clinics in neighborhoods the city had forgotten. I signed everything anonymously. The only name that mattered was the one in Grandpa's handwriting. Some evenings, I returned to the vault. The shelves still stretched like ribs without lungs, but I no longer saw absence. I saw proof of a burden carried and transformed. I would stand with the key in my palm and whisper, "I'm trying. Grandpa, I hope I'm making you proud." The silence no longer crushed me. It felt like an embrace. Months passed, and one evening I sat on a park bench as the sun bled orange across the city. Children's laughter drifted through the air, bright and free. For a moment, I imagined the other life: the mansion, the sports car, the smug satisfaction of proving my family wrong with noise and glitter. But the thought passed like a shadow. What I had now was quieter, deeper. The warmth of soup shared with strangers, the light in a student's eyes holding a scholarship letter, the hum of a clinic alive with care. I understood then why Grandpa had chosen the hardest path for me. He wasn't punishing me. He was preparing me. The garage wasn't an insult. It was a threshold. The gold wasn't wealth. It was a test. And the trust wasn't simply money. It was responsibility. True worth is never measured by what you keep. It is measured by what you give. I held that truth like a torch and stepped forward into the night, no longer afraid of being nothing. I was Sophia Carter, and I was enough. If this story moved you, please remember to like, share, and subscribe so more people can hear stories of resilience, redemption, and the power of legacy. And let me know in the comments, what would you have done if you were in Sophia's place?